Well, my name's Mark Spendlove. We're here today. We're in the field in mid-Northamptonshire, Rothwell in Northamptonshire, on a showery day after a very difficult winter. Standing in a field of a newly sown herbal ley, one of these more complex leys that is actually established very well. Farming wise, we're really a traditional mixed farm. We do grow some grain. We keep a suckler herd. That suckler herd comprises of blue cross cows out the dairy herd crossed to Hereford bulls to produce what I would term as supermarket spec cattle, what I again would loosely term as peas in a pod cattle, aiming for O+ and R for grade cattle. To do that, yes, we've got involved with these herbal leys, really yes, partly to produce a good quality silage, good quality grazing, and to reduce our overheads, which really, yeah, that's what they're about. We're looking for these deep-rooted grasses and herbs and legumes. So yes, this farm here, yes, we are in mid-Northamptonshire. The farm currently runs to something, well, I don't generally talk about acreages, but somewhere just over 500 acres currently. The soil types are everything from what we're standing on here, which is an ironstone, right through to a medium clay loam and various things in between. We've probably got 3 or 4 soil types on the farm in total, so we've got plenty. It's no good thinking one machine will do everything, because it clearly won't. We run a very traditional mixed farming system, so we have some arable, we have the suckler herd, where the calves are born on the farm and they go right the way through for killing. There is a small flock of sheep on the farm that belong to my daughter and son-in-law, and so yeah, we're just a typical mixed farm, something that went out of fashion, but now people are paying the price for that, and it seems becoming more fashionable again. We're in a very dry area. We're standing on the edge of this valley here. We're in a rain shadow, and we have to manage with 18 inches of water per year, which is clearly you can't get the best out of ryegrass doing that, so we've had to change and adapt. The ryegrasses, as you'll appreciate, they love a bit of nitrogen to grow. For nitrogen to work, you need water. We need the rainfall for the water. Now we don't get that, so there's no point in putting nitrogen on grass after the spring in the year, because we just don't get the water to take it down for the grass to pick it up. So really that was one of the drivers for us to turn to these more complex herbal leys. The grass element we've changed fairly radically. We have virtually dropped out ryegrass, and we've gone really for the timothy, the cocksfoot, and these newer festiloliums, all deep-rooted grasses, to reach the moisture. Now the purists amongst the grass producers probably wouldn't like the look of those. They can be a bit tufty, but they do have an incredible growth rate, and it's perfectly palatable grass, providing you don't let it get too old and too tall. And then of course we've got the clovers in there, which are key to producing the protein. We're making silages that are anywhere from 15 to 17% in protein, probably a bit too high, but it's easier to water it down. It's cheaper to water it down than what it is to add protein. We've gone from buying lorry loads of rape meal to buying none now, because it's all produced on the farm, and we're not buying the nitrogen fertiliser to grow the grasses. So there's a double win in that. obviously, you know, today with the new SFI schemes, we're also, thanks to the government, we're being paid now to grow these mixes, which is obviously a bonus, but they would still stand up on their own. Some folks will shoot me down for saying it, but they would stand up on their own without the subsidies, but every bit helps. Well, just a brief history on ourselves here. We, as a family, we farmed up here now, as I put it, we're newcomers to the district. We farmed up here as a family now for approximately 75 years, but we were 400 and odd in the last place, so we don't move about an awful lot. We do have our own farm that we own, or that we're fortunate enough to own. Not that I like the word, because we're only really custodians, but the farm that we're standing on this morning, this is a rented in farm. In the family that own it, they've owned it now for 100 years, but my old pal, he died, and I've taken it on. You know, my way of farming is, and it's all to do with these lays and current thinking. I would just say to anyone, keep it simple. There's multitudes of people out there wanting to sell you pots and potions and machines and everything else. Just keep it simple. And behind us, you can't see it in the picture, there's a muck heap there. Folks are brewing all sorts of things up to put on the land, but really, what better digester do you have for bugs than the cow's gut? That manure heap, it's full of them. That'll be spread on the land. We don't really want to be incorporating it. The worms are our incorporators. They pull it down into the ground for us and mix it about. And by the time they've digested it, it's there for the microbes to deal with. And once the microbes are dealt with it, that's releasing the nutrients to the crop that you've applied it to. So yeah, it perhaps sounds a bit wacky to some, but really that's it's just back to basics and keep it simple. I suppose really the direction of travel that we're on at the moment is to try and keep ourselves in business rather than the multinational companies that want to sell us everything. So really key to that is to keep those delivery lorries off the farm, because for every lorry that arrives, there's a bill follows the next day. We've seen our nitrogen use drop off dramatically, largely because of the deep rooting plants, the legumes, etc. in these lays. They just don't, they're producing their own nitrogen. The knock-on effect of that, because we run a rotation here, and these lays are part of the rotation, so the nitrogen that's being fixed is helping to grow the cash crop when we actually grow it, whether that's barley or wheat, something of that nature. The other angle to it is to keep the feed lorries away, because we're now producing, well, 95% of the feed on the farm are the silage from the Herbal Leys, and we do mix oats in with it as a winter feed. I say oats are really a much misunderstood feed. They feed far better than they analyse. So yeah, it's just really helping to keep those costs down. And I would just make your equipment last. You know, we're not here to keep machinery manufacturers in business. We harvest these lays with a self-loading forage wagon. Shelf life of one of those machines has got to be 30 years if it's looked after. There's no need to keep changing it. And the arable equipment that we have, well, the value of it wouldn't go above 4 figures in total, excluding tractors and the seed drill. Yeah, just keep it simple, keep your costs down, and keep yourself in business and not somebody else. One of the things that I would sort of really add to do with the whole concept of farming like this now, that is the key to it is mindset. It probably seems fairly alien, even though we're only recycling old ideas from decades ago. It probably seems alien to some people of my generation, that all we've known is a tractor and a plough and plenty of black smoke and and yeah, turning the land brown. So you've got to get into mind that it will work. It will work for you, but there is a lot of attention to detail. Don't think you can do it simple. Don't think you can do it completely for nothing. The field that we're standing in, it was, you can see the stubble in the grass seeds. We'll call it grass seeds. This field was left in stubble over winter. It should have been planted last autumn into wheat, but clearly with the weather it never happened. So we came into here this spring. It was capped. We had to break the surface. It was no good trying to direct drill into it, in my opinion. We had to break the surface with a cultivator, and we've made a proper seed bed, and we've got a result. In the past I have tried to cut corners and do it and just direct drill, but this field here is what we would term in this area as boys land, or this part of the field. A lot of the land that we're on is far more challenging to get a seed bed, so you've got to get your timings right. You wait for it to warm up in the spring. It's no good going drilling just because Fred over the hedge is drilling. He might want to do it the wrong time of year and drill it twice, but I just say do it once, do it right. Wait for the ground to warm up, wait for conditions to be right, and then a bit of attention to detail and get on with it. And hopefully it'll rain. If you pick your timing right, it'll rain afterwards and it'll be up and away. Yeah, so the lays we always establish in the spring here. We've tried in the autumn, but the clovers they do struggle in the autumn, and the frost, if we had a frosty winter, a cold winter, that can mess them about. But we also find, being in an arable area like this, that we can get problems with the pea and bean weevils hammering the clovers. So always in the spring, once the ground has warmed up, as I alluded to earlier, don't just go drilling because Fred next door's drilling. Be your own person and wait for the weather, wait for the ground to warm up, and yeah, it'll pay dividends. Yeah, once it's in the ground, really, don't be in too much of a hurry to start doing things with it. You won't get a lot of production in the first year. Yes, you'll be able to graze it later on in the season, but certainly don't leave cattle on it for prolonged periods, and certainly not in wet weather. Do give the lay a chance, but you'll find that in the autumn of that first year you will be able to fatten lambs on it. I mean, there is some talk about affecting the estrogen cycle in ewes, the breeding sheep, so just be a little wary of that. We've not found that it's made any difference, but some people have reported it. So just fatten your lambs on it. If you can't do that and the weather's against you a bit, possibly top it. That'll all help it to tiller out. But the next year you'll comfortably get three mounds of silage off of it. You could paddock graze it. I wouldn't necessarily stock graze it, set graze it. I'm quite keen here really to have a go at this. The fashionable name is mob grazing, but really it's paddock grazing. I'm not that keen on the idea of this so-called mob grazing, because you're growing a lot of food and you're wasting it. You put it through the animal's gut, let that process it, it'll come out, the goodness of that will come out the back end and back on the ground. I wouldn't, personally I'm not into this trampling it all in to help with the carbon in the ground, because the roots are doing that, the dung out the back of the cattle are doing that. So yes, it's very productive, and just make the most of it. We would typically leave these lays in the ground for 4 years. Now on that point, if you read some of the older books and speak to some of those of us that grew it sort of 40 and 50 years ago, it was generally never kept in the ground for a couple of years, because folks had an idea that really the ground got clover sick, and the clover plants typically died out and suffered from a bit of stem eelworm. Now, if you read up some of the older books, and in particular there's one called the Clifton Park Farming System, and they would suggest in there that the basic problem was years ago that the clovers came from countries where the climate was different to ours and it wasn't suited to ours. But of course those days we were growing it monoculture, it was grown for seed. And again, if you looked in our equipment shed, you know, there's nothing really modern, and there's no new novel ideas. It's old technology. It's a mower, it's a rake, it's a forage wagon. They've been around for decades now. The only new thing that we have an idea that we're trying on behalf of a company called by the name of Pottinger. They've developed a wildlife sensor that we can put on the front of the tractor, so that when we're mowing these leys, we find that certainly here we have a very high hare population, and they seem to love these clovers. So we're going to be trialling this sensor for them this year in the UK to see if it was designed to pick up young fawns where they have a problem with them in Germany. We're going to trial it here to see if we can pick up the hares and the ground nesting birds, because the ethos on this farm really is towards nature and wildlife, as well as trying to make a living. But also really you don't want dead animals wrapped up in the silage. That could put, you know, all sorts of toxins there in the silage, which would then pass on to your cattle and wouldn't do anything a lot of good. So yeah, we're going to see how we get on with that. It's not a particularly cheap piece of equipment. They're suggesting a price tag of £5,000, so anyone that has anything to do with the grant system that may be watching this, you might just want to have a closer look at it and see if there's funding available to help farmers to purchase it. Whilst we're here just looking at this, I would like to touch on our good friend the worm. He's probably the best worker you've got. You haven't got to pay him, he doesn't need holidays, he won't want time off for sickness, but he's there underground busy working away, and you need to look after him. Because he's doing a tremendous amount of work. He's converting that manure heap that we looked at, helping to convert that to plant food. He's mixed it in the soil for you. He'll do a much better job of incorporating that than the cultivator. Now, anyone that's into reading, there is quite an interesting book by Charles Darwin. It's entitled something like The Earthworm and Leaf Mould, or the other way around. It's well worth a read. There's only 3 real main points in it, but he does a lot of testing and experimenting, etc. in that book. But what he will touch on is the fact that a good earthworm population, bringing its worm cast to the surface when they're working really well, will make you somewhere in the region of 2 inches of fresh topsoil every 5 years. But you do need a good worm population for that. Now, if you really think about it, those of you that watch the televisions such as Time Team or Dig for Britain, you'll notice that all those old buildings and ruins that they excavate, one thing or another, they're generally something in the order of 2 feet under the ground. Now, if you think about it, no one actually buried those old ruins. They've got that amount of soil on top of them purely because of the work of the worms. They have worked it and shoved it to the surface, and that's left those remains at that depth. So if you're giving them time, all right, you've not got 2,000 years or 1,000 years to play with, but if they can bury something to that depth, they're working your soil just the same and doing the same job for you. This lay here, we're standing here on the 27th of May. This has had no fertiliser whatsoever. We do, where we can, we like to put a bit of sulphur on. The legumes do like the sulphur and it'll help the protein content, but they do really thrive on that. It's probably one of the most important elements that you can apply. But all of a sudden this is taken off. The purists would suggest that with all these seed heads it's gone by its best, but for us that's going to put fibre. Yes, we wouldn't normally be this late, but that's going to put fibre into the silage. It's going to save us incorporating so much straw in what could be a short straw year. But here, the red clover down here, it's there, it's thriving. It's nowhere near coming into flower yet, so that's yet to peak. Yes, there are just some flower buds here now, but yeah. As long as we can get this in the next week, 10 days, I should be quite content with this. There'll be a lot of tonnage. Now, to the untrained eye, this probably looks like a messy, weedy field, but really, if you got in there and studied it, there's everything you want in there. Yeah, there really is, and it'll make some good silage. Yeah, I mean, this field that we're standing in here, this one's probably only been into this lay about 3 years, so it's not quite as mature as the last field that we looked at. The chicory here is still a relatively small plant. It's still quite fleshy, whereas in that other field it was standing up here. The red clover here, yeah, it's just really is optimum for mowing now. We've got some flower buds, there's just an odd flower starting to come, but really the history of this field is that this is the first time that this has had a grass type crop in it that I can ever remember. This is on the farm that we rent in. My good friend and neighbour, he ploughed it, well, forever, and it was getting in a bit of a sad state. So really this is only sort of 3 years into what I'd call sort of a soil recovery period, and yeah, it's quite a decent crop. It's not the thickest of crops, but it's been a difficult winter, but this will be mown shortly, and then it'll regrow for a second cut in about 8 weeks time. By then the grass will be less vigorous and the sward will be more clover dominant, which will lead to a high protein content again. Just really, whilst we're standing here looking at the successes, I suppose we should talk about the mistakes. It's been a learning curve, and if some of you can learn by my mistakes, I suppose the key ones are really with this direct drilling and establishment of these crops, whether it's this lay or spring barley. The critical thing is soil temperature and conditions, and certainly not the calendar date. We have tried direct drilling these lays into overwintered old stubbles. That's not been a great success, certainly on the heavy land, and we did have to re-drill 130 acre field twice, which obviously wasn't a cheap exercise, but the result in the end was successful, and has worked well for us. So yeah, don't rush it, a bit of attention to detail, they're the key things really, and go with the weather. You can't beat it, and as I've touched on earlier, ignore your neighbours and what they're up to. Just do the right thing for your own farm. For those of you, that keep sheep, one of the bonuses of these lays is that it's brilliant for fattening lambs. Whether you want to be fattening in the summer or autumn or the winter, we graze, well, it's not so much myself, my daughter and the son-in-law, they have their own flock of sheep on the farm, and they will fatten all their lambs off of the aftermath grazing on these leys throughout the winter months. They're selling good finished lambs, 50 kilo plus lambs, with absolutely no purchase feed. It's purely this aftermath grazing. So really choosing the mixes that we sow. On the lazy one, I'll just ring up Sam at Cotswold Seeds. I'll tell him what sort of land, what type of land we're actually going to sow the lay on, and really leave it to him to pick the varieties of grass and legumes and herbs, etc., that are going to suit that type of land. And he knows us now. He knows really what the farm's like. He knows it's got to be drought tolerant because we are so short of water here, and we just need to get those roots in the ground to depth where the moisture is. Now, if you think here, our annual rainfall is approximately 18 inches a year. Now, if you take the soil, the water content in that soil, or the moisture content, is roughly 25%. It's 25% air, and the other 50% is what the soil's made up of. So if you take the top, I'll use English, if you take the top yard or 36 inches of soil, and 25% of that is water, that's 9 inches of water that this ground's capable of holding. 9 inches of water, where we are here, that's half of our annual rainfall. So it's a huge reserve for us, and these roots, they're getting down there, they're making the drainage channels along with the worms. We're getting the waters going down into the profile, and it's holding it, and it's quite clear in a dry season how green and how long these leys will hang on. When we started to change our ways away from, we were growing the grass mixes, like a lot of folks were growing west to old, tried that for silage and one thing or another, but then we moved on to getting plenty of white clover in the mixes, and really just because when the dry time hits and the natural curve of grass growth, bearing in mind that the old adage that 50% of your grass will have grown by the end of May, the growth of grass really tails off through the summer months, but that's when the clover comes into its own, because that gets up and gets away. But for conserving the grass to make silage, we first transitioned to ryegrass and red clover, thinking that the red clover was going to produce the nitrogen to grow the ryegrass, but the ryegrass, being shallow rooted, wasn't following the moisture. So yes, there was a lot of ryegrass in the first cut, but then that tailed off and then the red clover would dominate. So we did that quite successfully really for several years, and then as these herbal ley mixes, the more complex mixes came into vogue, we thought, well, we better give those a try, and we've moved on to those, and we would not turn back now. We need the grass, obviously. We really do need that. That puts fibre into the feed. The clovers are providing the protein, so they're essential. The clovers are deep rooted. The tap root there is a good 9-10 inches deep, and the rest of the root, if you look on one of the Cotswold charts, they're down there 3-4 feet deep. The chicory, that's got a great big fat root, that really makes some drainage channels, that does. I wouldn't say, everything's got its place. it needs to suit the soil type, and everything's got its place. So nothing in particular is more important than another. If something hadn't got a place and it was there, the only reason it was there just to look at it, we wouldn't have it. Yeah, really is, everything does a job. But they specialise in these complex seed mixtures. There's a lot of people that will sell you seeds now, but really I would be as bold to say some of those companies are just jumping on a passing bandwagon. Cotswolds have been dealing with these assorted seeds now for somewhere in the region of 50 years. They do have the expertise, they offer you the advice, they have the farm aid set up there in the Cotswolds where you can go and see a lot of this in action. Why do we use them? It's because they have that expertise. They're probably not the cheapest, but do you always get the best when you buy the cheapest? I would suggest not, so yeah, can't fault them.